when we launched Uber in Italy, we went to sit in a co-working space, and we would pretend the whole co-working space was actually our office. We were just three people, so that the people who come to visit were like, okay, this is like a serious company. And so like you kind of play this game all the time. And so it's very hard when you're in a struggling moment to go back and say, no, look, you know, we're we did this wrong. I made this wrong choice. I have to fire some really strategic person. I have to reorganize my cap table. I have to, change the direction of my product. I have to shut down the company, sell a part of the company, etc. These are the kind of decisions that are really hard to admit first to yourself. And I think one of the biggest problems is that founders never want to take that decision. So you spend a lot of time thinking about how not to take that decision.
Today, we're talking with Benedetta Arese Lucini. She's a senior and serial entrepreneur, now at her third startup based in London. Even before so, she was actually the one who brought some of the most successful startups from the foreign markets into Italy, like Uber. We're talking about how challenging is being a founder and what has been her journey throughout these years, but especially also what are some of the misconceptions that, in her opinion, are still behind the gender gap and the gender balance between being a male founder versus a female founder and so on. I hope you enjoy and let me know what you think in the comments. Hi there, here we are back at the Founders Bible. Hi Benedetta, how's it going today?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So, as an icebreaker right now, it's quite a recurrent question that I ask every founder here at the Founder Bible. How come you're a founder? What's your story? And what has been the challenges so far?
Yeah, so I think that some people say founders, anybody can be a founder. I actually believe you kind of have to have it in your DNA, because it's a terrible career choice. So I actually decided I wanted to be a founder probably when I was 10. I have the luck or of having a father who's a founder, and he started a software company in the 90s. And my favorite thing as a 10, 12-year-old was not to go play at the park, but actually to go sit in his office and play with the first IBM computers, and personal computers. So I was really uh, fascinated by this world, and I told him I wanted to sit on a chair, the office chair, and have my desk, and that's where my career was going to be. And so that's how I started to decide I wanted to be a founder. Then the path to get to a founder was a bit more rational. I actually decided I'm not one of those founders that has like a burning problem and starts a company straight away. I actually went through the traditional career of banking, and then I went into other startups, and I was lucky enough to meet incredible founders along the way, from Oliver Samwer of Rocket Internet to Travis Kalanick of Uber, and that gave me a bit the confidence to, after all my work in other people's companies, to start my own.
Wonderful. That's super interesting story and kind of romantic, I would say, seeing the picture of the father and the daughter. So one thing that I think it's relatively common, or I would say it's definitely common for every founder, I would call them in Italian like the walls smashed with the face, right? All of those huge challenges that we face, that we may expect sometimes, some other times they just come out as sudden experience, I would say. What was for you, or what were for you the main walls that you really hit within your career that made you grow the most, I would say?
I think the hardest part in my career was always overvaluing people and undervaluing challenges. So very often when you start a company, you get that wave of confidence initially. You get your first money, you find the first customers, and then you're all excited, and that initial feedback loop makes you feel like you're strong enough to do anything, right? So one of the big problems I faced was that actually these initial moments are a bad signal that kind of makes you feel like you can do it all on your own. And what I've learned, this is my third startup, is that actually you can't do things on your own. And I think the biggest power of a founder is to surround him or herself with very smart people who can do things for them or for the company. And that's something that I really learned along the way. So, and that means people who are going to be there when things get hard, people that are not going to judge but that are going to support, people that are going to find and challenge you so that you can think about things a different way. And I truly believe these are the moments that I remember as being the hardest, where I was like feeling very much alone because I didn't surround myself with the right kind of people who would support the journey along the way.
Why do you think you didn't do it from the beginning? And I mean, this is quite recurrent for founders. If you look at the studies, if the more that I talk with them, everyone starts alone, or at least thinks, as you were saying, that they can do it alone. And then when things really, really get challenging, we have kind of a barrier to share, because on one end, you don't really want to share with the people really next to you, like employees, because you always need to be the happy face, the visionary. You don't want to share with investors, because otherwise they will look you and say, who did I give my money to for? So like, why and how? Why did you end up in situations where you were alone, and how did you get out from there? I think this is really the most interesting insights for the listeners, so they can also get out and get unstuck, let's say, for themselves.
Yeah, so it's very well known. They always say that founding a company is a very solo journey. That's why generally you have a co-founder, but not always. It's actually I read that data. It's like 96% of reason why founding teams fail is because co-founders don't get along. So actually, the co-founder is not always the best person to lean on. And so and I saw it myself. I angel invest, so a lot of the times of companies that didn't go well was because founders had problems. Um, so I think that the big problem exactly is that the environment and the press and the way founders are portrayed is like superheroes, and so you have to be shown always about raising the next round, being in the press for doing the best deal. And so you kind of get into this loop where you have to put a face in front of what you're doing to show that you're better and stronger, because obviously you're faking it, like fake it until you make it, because you're very small, so you have to fake that you're great just to get inside doors. There's a funny story. When we launched Uber in Italy, we went to sit in a co-working space, and we would pretend the whole co-working space was actually our office. We were just three people, so that the people who come to visit were like, okay, this is like a serious company. And so like you kind of play this game all the time. And so it's very hard when you're in a struggling moment to go back and say, no, look, you know, we're we did this wrong. I made this wrong choice. I have to fire some really strategic person. I have to reorganize my cap table. I have to, change the direction of my product. I have to shut down the company, sell a part of the company, etc. These are the kind of decisions that are really hard to admit first to yourself. And I think one of the biggest problems is that founders never want to take that decision. So you spend a lot of time thinking about how not to take that decision. And the decision usually is the right one, the first one that comes from your gut. And the problem is that you actually hide yourself behind not taking it. And that's the biggest issue. And what I learned from my first company, where I spent a lot of time not making decisions, especially in the middle of COVID, like there was also things which are external factors, so also not internal. Like, COVID came, a lot of companies had to make like really tough choices. Um, and maybe you delay them because you try exactly to keep everybody happy in a bubble of like everything's going to be okay. And my second company, we had again an external factor, so like a regulator kind of coming in and saying what we were doing wasn't okay, which wasn't true, but like that's how it is in fintech. And you just react very fast. So you're like, okay, I remember the first time I didn't react. So my second time I talked to my co-founders and my employees. I was like, this time I'm not going to make you wait and see. Like, you're just going to help you find a new job. I found new jobs for all the team in less than a month. I covered salaries until they didn't get the new job. I give them the time to choose actually the best job they wanted. And that was for me the best decision ever, because then I didn't feel the burden long term to say, okay, like, how is it? How would it played if I stopped earlier, if I kept a bit of cash flow, etc. So it's always reaction is probably the easiest way to get out of that impasse. And then I find myself now having a lot more founder friends who are not investors and not employees, who you can talk to because they just start in a different company. Sometimes they're angels, but that's okay. Generally angels are very supportive. And I want to think of myself as a supportive angel, so then you can ask the tough questions also to your, you know, network of founders, I would say.
Yeah, I was talking with an angel investor. I mean, a second or third time founder that also turned angel investor in one of my interviews, and he was sharing exactly the same points. But at the same time, I always struggled as a founder to go in a situation where I could really feel this kind of like openness to rely on it, because there is always kind of the feeling that you're either over asking or you're over relying on somebody. How did you structure a little bit of your, let's say, kind of a formula for yourself to understand, okay, that's a good person to talk about X or Y, or okay, no, that's not a good feedback, that's a good feedback, I'm going to work on it. What has been your process over the years to kind of refine this judgment call, I would say?
So I set myself the same thing I do for the founders I'm angel investing in. I actually also, some companies I'm not even their angel, but I support some women founders or early on founders who I really like what they're doing, even if I'm not an angel investor. So I make sure that I know the way the person I want to interact with wants to be interacted with. Some want an email, some want to schedule a call, some want like a WhatsApp, whatever it is, to make sure that you find the right way that they like to be interacted with, right? So to have the space. And the second, so even for me, I find out how the people I want to interact with react. Like, can I just take up the phone and call them? Do I have to schedule something? Da da da. And then I usually make sure that before I talk to them, I am very clear about what I want to talk to them about. So, not just like, let's have a 20-minute call every 3 weeks where then you don't know what you talk about. And I find that really frustrating also, because I hate being on calls. So I just like prepare myself and I'm like, okay, I want to talk about this thing in particular, and I want to talk about it with this person in particular because I know that they know how to do this. Example, my new company is a B2B. I only lived, every company I've ever done is B2C. So sometimes now I feel like a little bit like I have no idea how to go ahead and do things in the B2B space. And it's really exciting, but sometimes you're like, okay, before I fuck it up, let me call who are my 2, 3 people who I know who are founders B2B, who have been really successful in what they do. And I ask them, how to create the funnel in B2B, or like specific, very specific questions. Sometimes I take them for lunch. Sometimes we have a call. Sometimes we have like a meeting, etc. But this way, I like, they know exactly what they have to help me with. I know exactly what I want to get out of that call. and that makes the process for both people like efficient. And I think this has always been one of the things also for me. Like, I hate when people, if somebody is listening and they want to ask me anything, don't write me on LinkedIn writing, "Can I go for coffee?" and tell you, and so we can chat. This is the worst thing you can do for me. Like, if you tell me, "I'm doing this, I need this help on this thing specific," I will always answer and say yes. If you send me, "Let's go for a chat," which is a very common thing, people think it's a good idea to do, I'm never going to reply.
Yeah, I still you brought me back with telling this story to one of the very first time that I spent time in Silicon Valley, and then I was at the Singularity University venture gathering, and they kind of got us through almost a week of how to schedule and interact with investors and people in Silicon Valley. And that was kind of like the to-do list that you just mentioned, like very clear plans, very clear requests, make very good questions so that you can really get very good answers back. Definitely. So one more question, Benedetta. I would like to talk about a little bit the emotional journey of your experiences. The main reason why I even started the Founder Bible, as I mentioned before hitting the recording button, is that I faced myself huge roller coasters. I found myself in super high moments, super down moments, psychologically, physically, and so on and so forth. And after my last venture, I went back on studying a little bit on what's going on in the world of startup and founders. And I discovered actually there is not even the minority that has these problems, it's actually the very big majority. We can go into data a lot, but I'm very curious to hear your own personal experience. From an emotional point of view, how are you made as a person, as a woman, as a founder woman, and so on and so forth? How was like the evolution from that point of view? If you can share anything on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that being a founder woman or a founder man doesn't change much until you become parents.
Hmm.
And I think it's a problem for both men and women in general. But definitely for the woman, it's still a bit of a tougher experience. So I have quite a group of female founders who are also mothers, and there always been a lot of stigma still around this. There's still the idea that the founder type is the, you know, young boy who quits college and starts working day and night, living with his friends in some kind of pad. And I actually think that idea of a founder is completely wrong. Like, the data says that average age of a founder is like 40 years old, not 20. The average,
Especially the successful ones, for sure.
yeah, and the average like time span to make a company successful is longer than like Uber, you know. So it like there are the thing that I would love to try and do, and the reason why I come on these podcasts and I talk as honestly as possible also through my LinkedIn and about what I do, is just I want to take off that idea that there's one type of founder and there's one type of way of founding companies. And I also have always hated a little bit, even though I've used it as my tool, the fact that because I'm a woman, I over get like sometimes put as like harsh or tough or, you know, not as good, right? And that's kind of the issue sometimes that comes with being a women founder in a still sort of male dominated world, right? There's a little bit of stigma that comes around it.
How did you navigate it?
So I actually have a lot more male mentors and people who support me and have referred me and etc. than women. I actually think women are really bad at supporting each other, which is really sad. And I shouldn't be saying it, but it's true. And even as more women get into VC, I don't think the women in VCs are supportive of the women ecosystem as they should be, to be honest. How do I overcome this? I I just talk about it, you know. I don't make it a problem. I will reply to some event if it didn't go the way I felt it should be by saying that it wasn't okay. Or I just, create a reputation that even though people will say I'm tough, like the people who really know me know that I'm tough when I have to, and but like a good person in the end, right? And so you just try and live and take away those stigmas by showing results, right? Talk, let the numbers talk, not like you as a person, right? So let what you do talk. So that's what I try and do.
Definitely. Are you willing to share a little bit more on why do you think the ecosystem is still not supportive enough? Because I think, especially for men, the let's say, unless and until we don't really get it plain straight in the face, we don't really get it in most of the cases. So I think this could be a very good chance to clearly say, okay, guys, or even girls,
Mhm.
this is not working for these reasons.
Yeah. So I must say, and I reply, I want to make sure that it's clear that actually men have been the most supportive of my career ever. Okay. But I do still believe that there is a general difficulty, which may come from either the woman or the man, I don't know, in the idea that, like, see and envy sometimes my friends because my male founders, because they can just go close a deal over a drink. And I know it sounds horrible, but it's true. Like, because if two people go for a drink and it's two buddies and they just go for a drink and they're talking and then they kind of connect and then they're like, okay, I want to back you because I believe in you, and that happens, that's okay. And I would be happy to go for a drink because I can go for a drink with a guy. It's not like I'm afraid. It's just there's still like a social stigma around it whereby it cannot be done that much and that often. And so there's very little chance of ever having, like, in a business context. And it got really worse with the all woke mentality, and now it's kind of, we'll see how it goes, but like the whole woke made it even harder to make any kind of comment or decision to, like, you know interact between men and women. And that's, I think, the general problem. Like, I have no problem with it because I don't think that somebody who says let's go for a drink and discuss your company is like hitting on me. But on the other side, it's still not okay. But I think men do it more often. They have more in common with each other and they can do it, and it's fine. And I envy that. I'm not angry at that. I envy that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I can see it in many situations, and I do agree. I don't want to talk about the wokeism and so on. That's probably out of, it's not that out of scope, but it's definitely a delicate topic. But I'm seeing for sure, especially in the US. I think in Europe probably it's still a little bit more kind of normal as like interactions. But if you go back in the US, Silicon Valley especially, it's really dangerous. To be honest, as a male, in certain situations, I felt in danger because I really didn't know what to say, what to do, because everything that would come out naturally with the best intention possible, I always had the feeling, oh my gosh, is actually gonna be taken in this way or that way or the other way? What's going on here? Oh, that okay. Then I just mute myself.
Yeah. And it's a problem because then I'm thinking about all my career. I did banking, I did like tech and etc., and all the people along the way who have supported me, helped me, give me intros, talked well about me, very often were men. They were my bosses, right? Like, so it was fine. And so I'm like grateful that it was okay. It's just in the startup world, it's still very complicated. And
Yeah.
then the last thing is that I don't think it should be okay for, like, I love the idea that Flow, which is a femtech startup, the most successful, is started by a man. And the reason why I like it is because it shouldn't be that women have to pitch femtech companies. There's no men tech as a category. I don't know, right? So I've always done fintech, and now I do like AI and deep tech and science. And I think it's great. Like, I love when I meet a founder who's a woman who does fintech, insurtech, I don't know, like some deep tech stuff, health tech, right? Not just fashion and femtech.
Yeah, yeah, I see. But how would you answer then to those people saying certain women, in their eyes, in order to go through their career as equal as possible to men, then they toughen up and they became aggressive or very masculine and so on? There
Because
is
this
always
is
this
what they need
dichotomy
to
and balance,
say.
right?
But this is what I was telling you. You can ask a lot of people who will say I'm aggressive or I'm tough or but it's not true. It's just a way of depicting a woman because she's acting the same. But it's not that we're not any different. I mean, I can tell you, I know examples of male founders who are praised as being like the great founders who are horrible people. And so, like, actually, I don't think it's fair because it's never talked about the aggressive attitude of like a man. It's just, it gets depicted only in certain situations if a woman is really, believes in what she does or is like comes across very firm, and then you put this title around it, and it's really sad because I've never heard this being discussed about male founders.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for me, if I can share kind of a little bit of wisdom on this, as you may have understood from the name of this podcast and the brand behind it, which is Holgren Wisdom, my new venture. I'm really working hard to merge the ancient wisdom with science. And there is a long story of why I'm doing it. This is not the place to reiterate it, but one thing I learned, especially studying the ancient wisdom, is that there is not real male and female as the body. Yes, of course, you have different organs, but each individual has a balance of energies that are both masculine and feminine. And the key is not for the woman to be as feminine as possible and the male to be as masculine, but actually the real art and the happiness and the fulfillment comes from the balance of these two energies, right? So I totally align with you. And I think probably the real conversation should be on reuniting the poles, right? Because now extremism is booming. We are all trying to say you're either one or the other. How can we meet between and reconnect and find kind of like a common narrative for us?
I mean, I think the important trait is that it shouldn't matter. Like, being a founder is hard enough. Let's
Yeah.
not make it harder on women, right? Like, that's the real point. It's hard enough to be a founder. It's really, I tell people jokingly, like, they say, why do you start another company? And I'm like, because I'm like unemployable. And I feel like really this is something that happens when you start founding companies, that you can't be employed anymore in the corporate world because your way of thinking of doing is completely different, and therefore your only path feels like this one, and it also is the only one that really satisfies you truly, and this is how I feel. But you need to realize, and I think this is important because I think in the boom periods of funding, a lot of people think, okay, doing a founder is like an easy buck, because what people talk about is always the success stories. They don't talk about what goes wrong. And so everybody's like, great, look at all these companies, they're raising millions, I'm gonna like do like a copycat or something similar, etc. And instead, like the way I think about fundraising, and funding, founding a company and then fundraising is just a tool to make sure your company gets somewhere. And it could be equity or debt, or like there's different types, or you make revenue, or you bootstrap, like whatever. But you have to really truly believe that you're trying to solve some problem which viscerally hurts if you're not trying to do it, because that's how you can really be a founder and overcome all the mess around it, all the roller coaster, the bad days. I often go home and go to bed like saying, why am I here? Tomorrow I'm going to send my CV to like some bank and like get hired and have a salary finally at the end of the month, etc., and not have to deal with it. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I cannot do this because what I'm trying to build is really important to me. And I think every founder has something where they're really important with. And as an angel, this is what I like to find, like a founder that really truly loves sometimes also unsexy stuff, right? That is like something that they truly want to solve. And this is what really, I believe, helps you move forward. um, I started a new company in the middle of the mess of my old company having to like shut down because we had like issues with the regulators. And even though I had I was like, I'm never going to start a company anymore, I like felt so deeply about the problem that I was like, this is something that has been in my head for so long, and I've never had the courage to do it. And I think because it's a big problem and it's a hard idea, and so it's going to be a difficult one. But I think today with AI and everything, it's something that can be done. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to jump like all over again. um, and sometimes people think, oh, but do you really have a job? Like, what are you doing? Like, this kind of thing. But I don't care, because I'm not here. And I think this is what founders should know. You're not here to like get the article on TechCrunch or be like on the list of the fastest companies, best CEOs, blah, blah, blah. You should be thinking of yourself as the facilitator of solving this problem. And that's how I think about being a founder. It makes it a little bit easier, I guess.
Okay, let me make a quick break from the show to explain you why this project came alive. 6 months ago, I started interviewing founders to understand what were the secret sauces for their success. But even more importantly, I was curious to understand how much pain they had to go through in order to achieve their dreams. I've been an entrepreneur myself for the past 10 years, and I know exactly how painful this journey is, but very few people are actually willing to talk about it. And that's exactly what we're doing at the Founders Bible for Resilience. We're finally breaking the toxic hustle culture behind startup life. I'm on a mission to build a new generation of founders that can leverage ancient wisdom and science for true long-term peak performance and longevity. If you want to be part of this movement, then check out wholegrainwisdom.com and join us now. Okay, now back to the show. Benedetta, I want to end up the conversation making one last question.
Yeah.
It's something that I usually ask everyone on the show, and it really starts from my understanding of the figure of the founder. We talked a lot about this role, which is more of a lifestyle than a role. I see founders, and myself included, as an Olympic athlete, but with a very big difference. The difference is that if you look at the sport athletes, the way that the system is structured to help them just think about winning and doing everything they need to be winning the Olympics. They have a team, they go into federations, into clubs, they assign them the personal trainer, the nutritionist, the physiotherapist, whatever. We founders often think that this is something that only a C level of a 100 million plus company can afford and should have. So we always, as we said at the very beginning of the conversation, we think we can do it alone. So what is today your super system? And if you can design your ideal one, if it's not yet the one that you have today, you could have additional 5 seats to fit for your own personal board of support. So no teams on the, like no employees, no people that are on your company, but are just working for you as a person to just have the right performance mentally, physically, emotionally to reach your goals. Who would you put there?
It's a good example, because yes, I actually think even worse is that founders sometimes want to become Olympic athletes of, like, and win of a sport they don't even know how to do. Like, when I joined Uber, like, none of us knew anything about transport. Like, so I mean, fintech was a bit more of a normal choice, but now I'm doing with Atom, a company that does supports scientists and researchers, and I have no idea what most of these people are doing. So, um, it's even a harder challenge. We're not even going for the sport we even know how to compete in. Sometimes we go into a different sport. And so I think that makes the team even harder. But for me, I've always realized that physical health, and I mean it more than by looking pretty, but like really doing sport to sweat, was very important for me. And so I've always cut out time, and I have a personal trainer. So that's somebody that really helps. And I do personal training at least once a week, if I can twice, and then I do sport on my own. And that's like my window of like feeling healthy. And the sport can go from running to yoga, so like all in between, right? So that's really important. Secondly, is family. So the seat I have for my family. And I'm lucky to have a very supportive family in what I do. So because my dad's an entrepreneur, he couldn't just say like, "What the fuck are you doing?" and go get a job. Um, and but I think the seats that still, and then my network of founders, which I've built through the years, and I always think it's wrong to think that mentors have to be like some senior person who has like 20 years more experience than you. Actually, I find my mentors the people who are in my same journey. So like they can be exactly the same founder, like series seed founders, because we are facing the same problems. And if you're asking like if I asked Jeff Bezos today if I could access him and I say, help me be my mentor, I don't think he would be as valuable as somebody who's going through the problem today. And then another seat is knowledge. I love to, and I would love to have more time, but like reading and finding inspiration outside of what I do every day, because that's actually what drives a lot of the ideas of a founder in a company. And so sometimes you will be surprised how much being interested in other things helps with what you're doing, even if it has nothing to do with it. And I would say the last one, which is something that, again, I would love to do more one day. If my scientists invent teletransportation, I would be very happy. But it's actually exploring. So like the idea of getting, meeting people from different backgrounds and going places that are not like your own, like feeling uncomfortable, doing things that are a bit like new, and being in a place that you don't know, all these kind of like uncomfortable things. So it's not just people, but I added like,
Yeah, amazing.
uh, are things that actually support a lot my founder journey. So yeah, so some are people, some are things that help me. So I would say family, fitness, exploring, feeling uncomfortable, and knowledge,
Amazing, amazing.
and my
Thanks so much
mentor.
for the, yeah. Definitely. Thanks so much for the conversation, Benedetta. Where can people find you? How can the community support you, or you support the community after this conversation?
Yes, so they can find me on LinkedIn. It's actually the only one social media that I use. And I use it a lot. They can write to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good at answering to everybody, as I said, with a
When they have
specific.
a good question.
Exactly. And they can find me on Atom AI, which is my new company, which is atomgroup.ai. And they can find me and my LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to me. I'll answer that more than my emails. So yes,
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Benedetta.
thank you.